This is a podcast from InRetroSpectPodcast.com. This is Pause Continue. My name's Peter Willington, and for the last 7 months I've been preparing, auditioning, and performing in various roles as part of a journalistic exploration of what it takes to get into the games industry as a voice actor. In this episode, you'll get another update on my progress, my experience of going into a recording studio to record lines for an upcoming board game adaptation, hear an interview with an actor that pays some of his bills with voice acting, and there's a very special announcement about Pause Continue that you'll need to wait until the end to hear. A packed show then, so let's crack on. Last time on the show, I told you that my final appearance on fan-made machinima Dragon Age The Calling had sadly happened that month. Well, it turns out I was wrong. Dragon Age The Calling episode 6 is now live on YouTube. I mean, that really must be the last time that I'll appear. The series has now had close to 25,000 views on YouTube in total, and seems to have found its audience. I'm really happy with how that turned out for its creator. A little closer to home, my pals at Steel Media, which is the company that owns Pocket Gamer, got me involved in performing a 1950s "Hey, you there" voice for its new advert for Swipe magazine. It was a quick but very satisfying project to be a part of, and I'm really pleased with how the final ad looks. Lazarus, the game by Spilt Milk Studios, is now in soft launch and is preparing for a global release on iOS. Keep an eye out for that one on the App Store very, very soon. Rather smashingly, I can also finally reveal one of the games that I'm in, one that I've been sort of teasing you with over the last couple of months. The game was announced by developers Auroch Digital earlier in July, and I'm proud to tell you that I'm going to feature in Games Workshop board game adaptation Chainsaw Warrior for iPad, iPhone, Android, PC, and Mac. The game hits digital store shelves at the end of summer 2013. Now, the game's announcement was met with a huge amount of press response, being covered on Cult of Mac, Forbes, Gamma Sutra, GameRanks, PC Games N, Pocket Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, Shack News, Touch Arcade, VG247, and dozens more besides. This is a pretty big game, and I'm in it. Now, I only have the one line, as I was massively outclassed by the professional actor that I recorded with. But I do have that one line, and I'm therefore credited in the game. In fact, do you want to hear that line? Yeah? Okay. So, I am the laughter that accompanies the Maniac card, perhaps rather fittingly, and I sound like this. Isn't that brilliant? I'm genuinely so thrilled to have been a tiny portion of this project, and it was fantastic to see the recording process in a studio environment, especially while the supremely talented Ben Gwalchmai was rocking the booth. I kept close watch of him as he read through the script in the educated New York accent required, noted how he emphasised every point with his whole body, as if he was forcing the words out physically. His performance was excellent, but most impressively, it was varied. This man can do all sorts of American accents within wildly different emotional ranges. This is true voice acting, and though I've pulled in decent enough performances before, his was in another league entirely to my own. I was fortunate enough to catch up with Ben a few days after the recording. Here's the conversation we had. So how did you get into voice acting?
Voice acting followed naturally for me from stage acting. Quite a lot of my training focused on the importance of the body and the voice being an essential part of each character as well. So quite a lot of the training I've been involved in has been what is generally loosely termed as physical theatre.
Mm.
Because of that, there's a good deal of focus on how characters stand, how they walk, how they're shaped, where their centre of balance is, and I've done some dance training as well, so that really gives you a focus on, when you're in character, how different that character is to how you hold yourself, or how you walk or act with people, how you dance even. And when you begin to kind of think about that in regard to what your voice can do as an actor, that then naturally follows that you test and go on sort of mini courses and try to regularly challenge the voice as an actor. And naturally, any work that then kind of came about, I would apply for, and I have been lucky to get some voice acting work.
Fantastic stuff. So, what are these? What do you feel are the key differences between more traditional stage acting and something like voice acting, which is really something we've only seen for since the invention of cinema? Where are the differences and where are the similarities?
It's a good question because it's also historically related. Uh, One of the reasons I was actually late to get on Skype today, Peter, was because I was just typing an article to help the PR of my upcoming novel we've released this year, and that's set in 1858.
Right.
And so I've studied quite a bit about the stage in 1858 as well as the stage from the Reformation, when Charles II came back and introduced women to the stage, right through to today, and what that means for practices of the actor. For example, obviously before the Reformation, many males had to train thoroughly how to be women and how to be voiced like women. So because I have researched the history of the ways in which actors have in the past changed their voices and bodies so much so as to appear as the opposite gender, it's a pretty interesting question. I would say that the major differences between voice acting and stage acting are obviously its context, its technologies, and its rehearsal time. Now, I'll sort of go into detail just a little bit about each of those, in that its technologies are a halfway point between stage and screen, because you have the recording studio and it's an immediate feedback process. If the director isn't happy with that particular sentence or line or paragraph, or even the intonation of the voice of the character, then they can very quickly ask you to redo it, much like they will on the set of a film, and you'll do several takes. However, it's not as strict and as out of the actor's control as screen/film, because the physicality and the strength of voice/intonation, all of the details behind the voice are still very much in not your control as much as they are in your favour. There's a lot of you still there, whereas in film, much of that can be edited and changed however the director or editor or sound editor wants it to be, which is of course part of the process. So that's the technologies.
so we kind of touched on the differences a little bit, but what is it that draws you to voice acting? Is it simply a paycheck, or is it that it's an interesting way to explore a character artistically? You know, what is it that draws you to voice acting?
For me, and I can't say I've discussed this with many other actors, but for me, it's much like poetry is to the writer. We were talking about this just the other day.
Mm.
It's it's kind of a pure distillation of form, and in this case, with acting, of character.
Mm.
On stage is massively different from in front of a camera, and like I said previously, in some ways, voice acting is a halfway point between, but it's more than that. It's For me, it's a way in which you can regularly and quickly get to the instantaneity of a character, and also if you can extend your range and challenge yourself, you can get to the heart of playing more characters that are interesting.
Okay. So I mean, is this a form of sort of slower improv?
Good question. Slower improv?
Or improv maybe with a net?
Well, perhaps, but then the director doesn't necessarily have to pay you if they don't like your work, or use your work if they don't like your work.
Sure.
With improv, more often than not, I'd say you're either an ensemble and you're working together to create a thing and thus improvising around a theme to make something bigger, or with, say, improv jam nights, you're just there to try things out. With voice acting, you are I'd say less improv, and more quick turnaround.
Mm.
You're encouraged and you're directed, and it's swift, and the feedback is even swifter. Um, but your range, I think, is, well, obviously given the brief, is so much more than something like film, where you would be necessarily, because of body shape, how you look, whatever they need, you're less typecast than with film. So voice acting gives you a much bigger range. That's my like of it.
You know, we've talked about range and we've talked about immediacy. You know, you seem like a smart, you seem like a smart guy. You seem like a very, very good actor from the time that we spent together in the recording studio. And this certainly seems like, this certainly feels like you like the iteration, you like the immediacy of voice acting. You know, is there room to experiment in the studio that there isn't elsewhere? Is that something that appeals to you, or?
Definitely.
Hmm.
Um, like you said about uh, iterations, uh, one of the things I found with film acting is that it's it's slightly brutal sometimes.
Right. Okay.
You know, if we were to take ourselves through a stage acting process, you get usually a minimum of 2 weeks rehearsal, hopefully, otherwise you're really pushing. In a person, you get 6 to 8 to however long the team wants. But I've been in a production where the turnaround time was 2 weeks on stage, and there you get to rehearse and you get to test things out a little bit, but you get on with it. In a film situation, I've been in a read through whereby the director has been not keen on my initial thing, and then I've almost completely radically changed it to adapt to what she wanted,
Hmm.
and then she said that's fine and good, and then she grew to like it even more over the course of the filming. We did one more read through, and then we filmed. But on that same film set, unfortunately, one of the actors just, I couldn't either remember her lines, or couldn't quite get what the director wanted, and her whole role got cut in half.
Mm.
Just gone.
Mm.
Just gone. Whereas, and that's the nature of film, because it has to be done. That's the turnaround time. That's the directorial approach and what they need and what they want. Whereas, like you say, with voice acting, the iterative nature of it means that if the director isn't necessarily happy with a sentence or a whole section, they'll say, "Let's do that bit again. Let's do this bit again," and that somehow is, unless obviously it's a much larger project, that somehow is more interesting, because what it does is, again, it affects your range, but it also gives you instant feedback that you can adapt and improve upon. And I think that improvement, that relationship in the studio, where, like you say, it does give you some room for experimentation, is really important. One example would be, I was doing a piece where the director was obviously quite tired, and he just went, I just need more coffee. Can you just, I don't know, mess around, try several different ways and voices until I hear something I might like? Because he wasn't necessarily displeased with my performance, but he just couldn't get what he really wanted, and he wasn't quite sure of it, and until I think I did a very Welsh accent, and he just jumped on the microphone and went, that one, on that one. And obviously he'd had his first sip of coffee or whatever it was he needed. And it is that iteration, that improvement and experimentation, which makes it a brilliant film to work in.
Fantastic. Well, that's been really, really useful for me. One thing that I really want to kind of get from you actually is I've been talking kind of when I've been talking to other people who have done voice acting, trying to get into it, especially at the start of this series, I asked for some top tips basically for getting into voice acting. But what I want to get from you, because I feel like potentially you're probably the better person to ask about this. You're a working actor, and you're staying in, you're making a living out of this. You do all sorts of other stuff. There's the book, and you're making stuff and producing and so forth. But from an acting perspective, what is that one crucial piece of information that no one tells you about voice acting that you can share to the listeners of this podcast?
Speak to the side of the mic.
Okay.
It may sound ridiculously specific, and I could talk about always applying for more work, continuing on, keeping up your range, always warming up your mouth and your throat, and always, ensuring that you're challenging your range. But one thing sound recordists hate and I had it, the first 2 times I did voice acting, is someone who is continuously knocking out their levels.
Right.
And if you're speaking too closely to the mic, too directly, they get really annoyed unless they've got brilliant what do they call that thing? Shields, mic guards. It's not always the case. So speak a little to the side of the mic, and all of your popping P's won't necessarily displease the sound editor.
Fantastic. I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. Ben, thank you so much.
That's all right. Very welcome. Thank you, Peter.
For my part in the studio, I really enjoyed the opportunity to perform, but I felt a little uncomfortable. Now, this was nothing to do with the developers or the setup or anything like that. It was a really good space to work in, and the lead on the project made me feel as comfortable as possible. But ultimately, I felt a bit embarrassed about getting in front of the mic, in front of other people, and then performing. Suddenly, I realised that I was acting for others again, something I haven't done for a long time, or at least I haven't realised I've been doing it for a very long time. As always, for all details about all of the work that I've talked about here, head on over to the post that accompanies this podcast on InRetroSpectPodcast.com. So then, what now? What do I do next? Well, here's that announcement I hinted at earlier. Pause Continue is going on hiatus. There's a damn good set of reasons for this. First, I'm now, by and large, essentially just waiting for projects to be finalised and to be put out there by the people that make them. And I don't feel stretching the podcasts out in the lead up to this would be a very good idea. To be honest, I think it would be boring. Secondly, we've got a special series of podcasts coming up here at InRetroSpect, so it feels like a natural place for a break. Third, myself and the rest of my colleagues are working on something very, very exciting that we'll share with you very shortly. It's going to take all of my attention, and I don't want Pause Continue or this new show to be a half-hearted affair. Pause Continue will return then to catch up on the projects that I've been involved with at some point. It might be by the end of the year, it might be well into next, but I will close out this arc when everything is said and done. Next week, Dr. Darby is back with another severe bout of digital wanderlust. But until then, make sure to visit InRetroSpectPodcast.com to catch up on any shows you may have missed. On the site, you can also find links to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, as well as a link to give us a review and rating on iTunes. If you could do that, that would be amazing. Oh, and you should subscribe to us on Stitcher Smart Radio if you're not a fan of iTunes. If you want to keep up with my daily activities, follow me on twitter.com/000, spelt, as always, with an audio-friendly X. Speak to you all next time.